deception is a very key word here. Americans may not be so unaware of the fact that a lot of wars the U.S. wages end up relying a lot on deception. They may be shocked this time around when it comes to the possible consequences of where this deception leads to.
And says a U.S. president will fail to defeat Iran, citing Donald Trump's acknowledgement that Washington's failed to do so for the past 47 years. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei pointed to Trump's repeated threats as he's boasted about the U.S. military. A leader said that Trump claims the U.S. has the most powerful military in the world, adding even the strongest military can receive a blow in a way that it cannot get back on its feet. Leader noted that more powerful than a warship is a weapon capable of sending it to the bottom of the sea.
That has been Iran's response essentially from the beginning of this escalation, Alastair. What do you make of the possible consequences for the United States?
Well, I'm not a military expert, first of all. You have to understand that. But secondly, I mean, this is what I understand. It is all-out existential war if it is started by either side, by Israel or America, or Israel joins with America in the war. And this was being underlined, I think, by the supreme leader that said, listen, you say you've got all these things, but we could even, put a missile into a carrier. Now, I'm not suggesting they're going to do this, but you remember that the Yemenis did do that. They didn't aim to sink it, but they wounded it so badly that it had to limp away and go back to base. So they're quite capable. They have all around the coast. And this has been for some years. The coast is honeycombed with silos right into the cliffs, deep inside, with anti-ship missiles. And as I said to you, even in 2006, Hezbollah nearly sank the latest Israeli frigate with a shore-to-ship missile. And it had to then limp off home. So, the idea that this is really, in a sense, Western Orientalism. Iran, how can it be technologically advanced? How can it have all these things? Because, well, the answer is, of the top 10 sort of engineering technological institutes in the world, I think 4 of them are in Iran. They have a huge investment. They have a great expertise in technology and weapons too. And so, as I say, who knows what will happen? But I think the Supreme Leader gave you there a very clear, he delivered it more forcefully than the rather halting transcription that we had. But it was no sense of, if you like, backing down or seeking a compromise. He was saying no. So I don't think the Iranians expect any compromise at all. In fact, I know they're not expecting any political process to come out of this. So they are preparing for all-out war. And what will be the consequences? Well, we will see. And we won't know for a few days after it starts. In my experience, the first strikes, are spectacular, and there are sort of video images of missiles landing, and people will say, oh my goodness, Iran is finished. And then it's usually in the sort of successive days that you see really what's happening on the ground. And the first thing to look for will be missiles hitting Israel. And I think those will start quite soon upon an attack. The missiles will come through. You remember it was the Israelis who had to plead with Trump to go for a ceasefire because of the damage that was being caused by Iranian missiles that were fired during that period. Hypersonic missiles, and their air defenses were not adequate to stopping them. They could stop the drones, but the drones were there to as decoys to draw out Israeli air defense systems and deplete them. But the sophisticated Iranian missiles got through, and the Israelis tried to censor all the details of damage. But a number of key sites, including their sort of scientific laboratories and a number of military areas, were hit by the Iranians. Of course, I mean, there will be huge censorship practiced in the West, and to give it a narrative that is, one of victory for the West. I mean, narratives have become, are sort of really overtaking the ability, particularly in the West now, to really to have a firm grip on geopolitical realities. I mean, the narratives are so bizarre. I mean, the narrative that has just come out and published from a group that claims to have done sort of soundings in Iran that 70% of the people are looking to overthrow the leadership, I mean, is just nonsense. I mean, they should have seen what happened on the annual Republic Day, when millions came out in support of the state, millions everywhere across the state to show their support for it. So, I mean, we live in this world of complete, I mean, we're not allowed to see and not allowed to think or to really understand, what we're taking on. And, it's down to one man and how he feels.
So I was hearing numbers somewhere between a third of maybe the country was engaged in some way, if not out in the streets, celebrating the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. So that's a lot of people. That's just people who were found in the streets. That's a third of a country of 90 plus million. So that's an extraordinary development, given that as you said, a big part of the United States is if we call it a strategy.
Please don't disturb us. We're gently sort of sipping our Chardonnay and just back from Munich and Davos, and we don't want to be sort of shaken by bad news. So I mean, I think they really don't have a sort of a sense, and they don't understand the consequences, because the consequences are, let me put it, one consequence is that the United States has a weakened economic position at the moment, particularly vis-a-vis China. China had a huge trade surplus, equivalent to about 4% of GDP this last quarter, huge trade surplus. And what happened, I mean, was that actually the imports that they bought from America were down 20% during this period. And that may sound, bad, but actually the level of their total exports to everywhere, bar the United States, went up enormously, I mean, staggeringly. So they had this huge surplus in China. And what the Americans are beginning to wake up to, what the United States is waking up to, is that they can't do anything about this. I mean, they'll go and say, well, we'd like you to consume more in China. But all that China has to do is to go on. It is largely self-sufficient in manufacturing. It is undercutting enormously all of Western manufacturing prices, because they pursued a different form of AI to ours. Instead of ours being focused on data center and sort of data management, they decided to go for a sort of weak AI that is diffused widely at sort of shop level, factory level, in terms of what might be called automation, robotics, things like that. So I was in China just before Christmas, talking to a businessman who had a large number of factories, and he said to me, "Look, Alastair, just take one example of one random factory. If I had 2,000 workers at the beginning of the year, I now have 200 because of the productivity gain that we have got and the competitive gain." And I sort of said, "Oh my God, this is going to be, this is serious crisis. This is a moment of, because, you've got deflation, price deflation, and we have price inflation. So we are completely uncompetitive against you after what you have done in terms of your application of AI." And this is what it was. So you see the things, and so what happens is that Besant is going sort of carefully saying, well, people have got to buy our treasuries because we need money coming in because there's a huge deficit. We're short of money. We need money coming in. And of course, what's happening is money is going out because people see that the dollar is devaluing, that its competitiveness is so low that it can't possibly, outcompete China. Take one example. A gigawatt of energy, of generated energy in China, is 1/6 of what it costs in the United States. How do you equalize against that type of, very advanced, if you like, manufacturing structure that they've created? And at the same time, you would need to devalue the dollar by about 140% to get to that, to equate your electricity costs between the two countries. So there is this, of course, we don't hear much about it because it's not something people want to talk about, but it means that China is in a very powerful position, not only economically, but militarily too. I mean, there's no doubt of that. So, China, it's not going to be just sort of brought into line by more tariffs. It's already clear, it's all clear it was going to fail. I mean, you remember Besant said, and Trump said, oh, we put tariffs on China, but the Chinese will have to eat the costs. Well, that hasn't happened. It's actually been the opposite. It's been the US consumer and the producers, the people who need raw materials and specialized materials from China are having to pay so much more. And so, manufacturing is failing. And also because, AI in the West, and this is not just an American problem, but the AI in the West, which is so focused on, managing data more than actually sort of making your manufacturing more effective and cheaper. Because it's so much data management, it's going to really bite into the middle classes of Europe. There is a job crisis. The level of middle class and young people's unemployment has reached a new all-time peak in the UK, for example. And it's going to hit, and is hitting, America too. And this time it's not going to be the blue-collar workers who've been, lost their jobs because of the offshoring of manufacturing. This is going to be because AI is targeting particularly things like people, staff in banks, staff in legal industries, and things where data is important. And that's all their products are organized that way. But what does that mean? And what does that mean, come the elections in America in the midterms? I mean, the job crisis is going to has started to hit the middle classes, not the top middle classes. I mean, they're still doing very nicely, dining dining well and living well, but some of the middle class and young people just can't find work.
Yeah, no, so true. There's a lot of reports about even the Department of Labor here in the US just absolutely fudging numbers, scrapping reports, erasing things. And a lot of that has to do with new reports, too, about how the US economy right now is just relying heavily on people 55 plus and older, the last generation, to have any kind of savings or to have any kind of jobs that paid them enough to save. So it's indeed a dire crisis. And Alistair, before I wanted to get to some more global implications, I did want to ask you about, in terms of the regional situation, how worried do you believe the countries in the region, the Gulf countries, these states are, not just about Iran's military response, which could be quite devastating, but also the economic situation? Because we're already hearing that oil, just based on these escalatory threats by the United States, oil is already rising in cost. And of course, many people note that many analysts have noted that the economic consequences of an all-out war would be devastating. How worried are these regional countries about this?
Well, just in one word, very, very worried. First of all, because if Hormuz is closed, many of them will not be able to export their oil or gas or liquefied gas. The Iranians have made clear that they're going to shut Hormuz long term if they're attacked, and then allow, like the Yemenis, you can negotiate with Iran a special license for your vessel to pass through it by being a non-belligerent. But any Gulf states or any states in the region, Arab states that, if you like, allow America to use their facilities in the attack on Iran, will not be allowed to traverse Hormuz. But then, as I said, recall, I mean, the Gulf states, the monarchies and the Emirates and others are very anxious that, as I said, there already is a movement amongst the Shia population in Iraq, and take Bahrain. That's 80% Shia. I mean, even Saudi Arabia, it's 13 to 15% Shia. I mean, they are very worried that this could turn into sort of something similar to an Arab Spring, if they have been complicit in an attack, given airspace and support to an American attack on Iran. Yes, they're very worried about that. And there's already great tensions inside the region between Saudi Arabia and UAE. I mean, it's virtually a war between those two states now. I mean, Saudi Arabia is calling the UAE a Trojan horse of Israel in the region, and is withdrawing assets from UAE. And the UAE is complaining about that. But it's bitter, and this is some of the tensions that, coming from this, the situation that we're in. And so Saudi is working closely with Turkey and Egypt in the region to create a new sort of, if you like, structure. And Turkey is becoming involved in it together with Pakistan. So, I mean, new things are happening, and people are very anxious about that. Of course, anyone who thinks they're just going to pass through this, if there is a major war between the United States and Iran, anyone who thinks the region is going to just sort of pass through unscathed with, just a minor sort of hiccup, I think is underrating and hasn't done their calculus properly.
Alistair, I wanted to ask you, a lot of people in the audience, a lot of people who watch this show wonder about this and ask me about this. So I wanted to ask you about it. Why doesn't Iran preemptively strike, given all of these indications that the U.S. will strike, U.S. and or Israel, but likely both of them will strike? what do you believe the calculations are here in terms of going through the negotiations process, if we can call it that, and of course waiting for the strike to come?
Well, there are, I think, two major elements into why they don't do a preemptive strike. And I think one of them will be foreign to perhaps many of you listeners. But Iran follows, if you like, the moral values of Islamic war, if you like. They have a concept of just war, just as we have Thomas Aquinas' Christian idea, much, maligned and ignored today. But, they have a concept of what is a just war. And in the Shi'i version of a just war, you do not attack, do a surprise attack on an opponent. You are obliged to give notice and to give an opportunity for a ceasefire, a hudna, to come into effect. And so when you look back at what has happened, I mean, during the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq used chemical weapons on Iran. Really, I don't know how many people, how many Iranians were killed, something like 5 million, or were affected by chemical weapons. And what did the Iranians do? They did not follow suit. They did not reciprocate. They could have gone down the same road and used chemical weapons against Iraq. They chose not to, even at the consequence of losing more lives, because they felt it was not morally correct to take that view. And so Islam does have, Shi'i Islam anyway, has injunction against weapons of mass destruction. And that is their position. So to start a war is considered to be morally questionable. Now, I'm saying this, to you sitting in America, where we've just been told at the Munich conference that the US, there's no such thing as international law. There's no such thing as morality. It is just, might is right. So I know it's hard, but that is the truth. What I'm telling you, it does have a big effect on Iranians. And you only have to look at the Iran-Iraq war for proof of it. They held back. They lost more people as a result of chemical attacks, because they didn't try and emulate. They didn't go to a nuclear weapon. They didn't go to chemical weapons or weapons of mass destruction at that time. The second thing is because they are part of a partnership with China and Russia. And to a certain extent, even India is, in its sort of more detached way, part of BRICS. But it has been very important to China and to Russia. And we see that in Russia's, policy statements. It's been very important to China and Russia, and for the global South, to stick to the, if you like, the principles that were outlined in at the time of independence. After the Second World War, in the non-aligned movement, the Beidang Conference and others, were very clear, that sovereignty needed to be respected, and that you had to consult with others, and it was not for one to make a decision against the group. So I think that they do observe the opinion. I mean, not ultimately, when we get to an existential fight like this, the choice of what happens is going to be Iran's. But they do listen. And, Russia is saying to them, it's not a good idea for you to start the war. Let America start it. I mean, if it's got to be started, yes, it may mean that, you lose a surprise attack. But overall, in terms of the sentiment, the moral values of BRICS and of the future, we don't want to go down the Western route. We want to, retain a sense of moral values in BRICS and in our foreign policy. China says this all the time, that it's interested in preserving values, civilizational values of states. So I think those are the two main reasons. Now, I understand that in my saying that, people will probably some will say, oh, well, we don't believe that. But I think there is a lot to understand and observe in the practice of war that has taken place. And don't forget, I'm not talking about ISIS. That is not Shiism. That is a form of extreme Sunnism. And that is a management of savagery. That is a complete opposite of what I'm talking about. And that's why the ISIS have been in eternal war with the Shia and wanting to destroy them. And so we hear all of this nonsense. I can't go into it on your program, but I mean, that many of the ISIS people put death sentences on precisely those people who in the West are said to be, practicing ISIS-type policies, when it's the opposite. They've actually threatened as apostates or worse to kill them. So it's a complicated, if you like, area that you've opened.